Congratulations, you've just woken up in 300 BC Egypt. Good news, the pyramids aren't built yet, so no tourist crowds. Bad news, you need to learn 47 survival skills today, or you'll be mummified by sunset, and not in the good way. Hey Night Owl, tonight we're throwing you into the deep end of history. Before you panic, hit that like button if you genuinely want to survive ancient Egypt, and tell me in the comments, have you ever woken up somewhere you definitely didn't fall asleep? Because tonight, that somewhere is 5,000 years in the past. Now get comfortable, because you're about to experience the most disorienting night of anyone's life. Now get comfortable, because you're about to experience the most disorienting morning of anyone's life, the moment everything changes. You open your eyes, and immediately know something is catastrophically wrong. The ceiling above you isn't your bedroom ceiling. In fact, it's not a ceiling at all. It's open sky, blazing with a sun so intense, it makes your eyes water instantly. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what you're lying on. It's not your comfortable mattress. It's hard, rough stone that's already burning your skin through whatever you're wearing. And speaking of what you're wearing, you look down and realize your clothes are completely wrong for wherever you are. But before you can even process the clothing situation, you hear something that makes your blood freeze. Voices. Multiple voices, speaking in a language that sounds completely alien, yet somehow familiar. You can't understand the words, but the tone is unmistakably curious and potentially hostile. These people are talking about you. You try to sit up and immediately regret it. Your head spins like you've just gotten off the world's worst roller coaster, and your mouth feels like you've been chewing sand for hours. Actually, scratch that. You have been chewing sand because there's sand everywhere. In your mouth, in your hair, coating your skin like the world's worst exfoliant. Where the hell are you? And that's when you see them. The people whose voices you heard, and they're not what you expect. 3 figures are standing about 10 feet away, and they're dressed like they're heading to the world's most authentic historical reenactment. Except their costumes are dirty, worn, and smell like they've been living in them for months. The man closest to you is wearing what looks like a white linen skirt and nothing else. His dark skin bronzed by what must be years of sun exposure. The woman beside him is draped in a simple white dress that reaches her ankles, and her eyes are rimmed with dark makeup that looks nothing like modern cosmetic. But it's the third person who really catches your attention. A boy, maybe 12 years old, who's pointing at you and chattering excitedly in that same alien language. And in his hand he's holding something that makes your modern brain short-circuit completely. It's a clay tablet. Not a replica, not a museum piece, but a working, everyday clay tablet, with fresh marks scratched into its surface. That's when the horrifying truth hits you like a sandstorm to the face. This isn't a historical reenactment. This isn't a theme park. This isn't even an incredibly detailed movie set. Those people aren't wearing costumes. They're wearing their everyday clothes. That clay tablet isn't a prop. It's a working and that sun beating down on you isn't being controlled by some lighting technician. It's the actual sun, in an actual sky, in what appears to be an actual desert. Somehow, impossibly, you've woken up in the past. Real past. Like way, way, way in the past. But how far back? The clothing styles, the clay tablet, the desert setting, your history class memories are scrambling to make sense of what you're seeing. Ancient Egypt. But when in ancient Egypt, and more importantly, how the hell did you get here? Before you can spiral into a full panic attack, the practical side of your brain starts screaming warnings, because regardless of how you got here or when exactly here is, you're facing immediate survival problems that make your concerns about historical accuracy seem ridiculously unimportant. First problem, water. Your mouth isn't just dry, it's desert dry. Stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth dry. In this heat, without water, you probably have about 4 hours before dehydration turns you into human jerky. Second problem, those people are still staring at you and their expressions are shifting from curious to suspicious. The man has moved his hand to what looks like a knife at his belt, and the woman has taken a protective step in front of the door. Whatever you look like to them, it's not harmless lost tourist. Third problem, you have no idea where you are, what the local customs are, or how to ask for help in a language that sounds like someone gargling with ancient gravel. And that's when the man starts walking toward you, his hand still resting on that knife. He's saying something in that incomprehensible language, but his body language is crystal clear. He wants answers, and he wants them now. The problem is you don't have any answers that would make sense to someone from 3. What are you going to say? Hi, I'm from the future and I have no idea how I got here. That's a one-way ticket to being declared a demon, or a madman. I hit my head and can't remember anything. That might work, but it doesn't explain your weird clothes or your obvious foreignness. The man is now close enough that you can see the suspicion in his dark eyes. He's not exactly threatening, but he's definitely not welcoming either. He repeats whatever he said before, and when you don't respond he tries a different phrase, then another. He's testing you, seeing if you understand any of the languages he knows, but then something happens that changes everything. You recognize one of his words. It sounds like Ma, and somewhere in your memory banks you remember that ancient Egyptian word meant water. Holy crap, you're actually in ancient Egypt. The realization should be exciting, but right now it's terrifying because it confirms that you're not just far from home, you're far from your entire millennium. But the man has noticed your reaction to the word water, and his expression shifts slightly. He points to himself and says something that sounds like, Ketty, is that his name? Then he points to you and raises his eyebrows questioningly. This is it. This is where you have to make a choice that could determine whether you survive the next hour, let alone the rest of your unplanned visit to the ancient world. What name do you give? Your real name, which will sound completely foreign and possibly demonic to ancient Egyptian ears. A fake name that might insult some local god you've never heard of. And while you're panicking about names, your body is making the decision for you. The combination of dehydration, heat, shock and sheer terror finally catches up with you. Your vision starts to tunnel, your legs wobble like overcooked spaghetti, and before you can stop yourself you're collapsing back onto that burning stone. But instead of hitting the ground, you feel strong hands catching you. The man, Ketty, is suddenly supporting your weight, and he's shouting something to the woman and boy. The suspicion in his voice has been replaced by concern, and the woman is already moving, pulling out what looks like a leather water container. They think you're sick, not dangerous, and right now, that might just save your life. The woman approaches cautiously, and offers you the water container. The smell that hits your nose is, well, let's just say it's not spring water. It smells earthy, muddy, and faintly organic in a way that makes your modern sensibilities recoil. But your body doesn't care about modern sensibilities right now. It cares about not dying of dehydration. But as you reach for that life-saving water, a terrifying thought stops you cold. What if the water kills you faster than the dehydration? Your 21st century immune system has never encountered ancient Egyptian water, with all its bacteria, parasites and whatever else might be swimming around in there. Drinking it could give you dysentery, cholera, or any number of diseases that modern medicine has made you forget exist. But not drinking it will definitely kill you, and these people are offering it freely, which means they drink it themselves and survive. Your choice is between certain death from dehydration, or possible death from waterborne illness. The woman is looking at you with growing concern, and she gently pushes the water container closer to your lips. Her eyes are kind, worried, and completely human in a way that transcends the 5,000 years between you. This isn't some historical figure. This is just a person trying to help another person who's clearly in trouble. So you make the choice that every survivor has to make. You take the water tastes like liquid earth, with a metallic aftertaste that makes you wonder what kind of container it's been stored in. But it's wet, and right now that's all that matters. Your body practically sings with relief as the moisture hits your parched throat. The woman nods approvingly and says something that sounds supportive. Then she turns to Ketty and they have a rapid conversation that you can't understand but can definitely interpret. They're deciding what to do with you. The boy chimes in with what sounds like a suggestion, pointing toward a cluster of low buildings in the distance. The woman shakes her head and responds with something that sounds like disagreement. Ketty listens to both of them, then looks back at you with an expression that's calculating but not unkind. Finally, he seems to make a decision. He points to himself again, Ketty, then to the woman, something that sounds like Nefret, then to the boy. Then he points to you and waits. This is your moment of truth, your first real communication in ancient Egypt. You need a name, and you need it now. Your real name would sound bizarre to their ears, so you quickly run through names you remember from Egyptian history. But then you realize you don't want to accidentally claim to be someone famous or important. You need something simple, common and hopefully not blasphemous. Dimi, you croak out, choosing something that sounds vaguely Egyptian but hopefully isn't the name of any major gods or pharaohs. Dimi. Ketty repeats it back to you, his pronunciation turning it into something that sounds more authentically ancient. Dimi. Close enough. The woman, Nefret, nods and smiles slightly. The first genuinely warm expression you've seen since waking up in this nightmare. But then Ketty says something else, and his tone has changed. It's more formal now, more serious. He's asking you something important, and you have no idea what it is. And that's when you realize the water break is over, and the real interrogation is about to begin. Ketty is pointing in different directions and saying different words, clearly asking where you came from. When you don't respond, he tries a different approach. He mimes walking, then points to you, then shrugs questioningly. Where did you walk from? How do you explain that you didn't walk from anywhere? That you just woke up here with no memory of how you arrived? In a culture that believes in gods, demons and magic, claiming to have mysteriously appeared could get you declared anything from a divine messenger to an evil spirit. Nefret says something to Ketty, her tone gentle but insistent. She's looking at you with what you're starting to recognize as sympathy. Maybe she thinks you're confused from heat stroke, or maybe she's just naturally compassionate. Either way, she seems to be advocating for patience. But the boy, Seneb, is clearly bursting with curiosity. He's circling around you, chattering in rapid Egyptian and pointing at your clothes, your hair, your skin. He's noticed that you're different, and he's not shy about expressing his fascination. That's when you realize your appearance is going to be a much bigger problem than you thought. Looking down at yourself properly for the first time, you see exactly what Seneb is pointing at. Your clothes, whatever they are completely wrong for this time and place. They're made from materials and in styles that won't be invented for thousands of years. Your hair is cut in a way that probably looks alien to people used to ancient styling. Even your skin, pale from modern indoor living, marks you as obviously. You're not just a lost traveler, you're a walking anachronism that screams, "I don't belong here" to anyone with eyes. Ketty seems to come to some kind of conclusion. He stands up and gestures for you to do the same. When you struggle to your feet, he nods approvingly. Apparently being able to walk is a good sign. Then he points toward those distant buildings and says something that sounds like an instruction. Are they taking you to their village? That could be good. Shelter, more water, maybe or it could be bad. More people asking questions you can't answer. More attention focused on your obvious foreignness. But as you start walking toward the buildings, you realize you have a much more immediate problem. This isn't the gentle sunshine you're used to from your modern, climate-controlled life. This is desert sun, unfiltered by pollution or atmosphere, hitting you like a physical force. Within minutes of walking, you can feel your skin starting to burn, and sweat is pouring off you like you're melting. Nefret notices your distress and says something sharp to Ketty. He looks at you more carefully, taking in your obvious suffering, and his expression softens with what might be pity. He calls out something and Seneb runs ahead toward the building. The woman pulls a piece of cloth from somewhere in her dress, and with gentle efficiency, drapes it over your head and shoulders. It's rough, hand-woven linen that smells of dust and sweat, but it provides blessed relief from the direct sunlight. She says something that sounds encouraging, and pats your shoulder. These people are helping you. Complete strangers who have no reason to care whether you live or die, and they're going out of their way to keep you alive. The kindness is so unexpected, so human, that you feel tears starting to well up in your eyes. But those tears of gratitude quickly turn to tears of overwhelm, as the full reality hits you. You're not just lost, you're not just far from home. You're stranded in a time before antibiotics, before modern medicine, before most of the technology that keeps modern humans alive. If you get seriously sick here, you die. If you break a bone, you might never walk properly again. If you make the wrong enemies, there's no police force to protect you. Every single thing you've taken for granted about survival, grocery stores, hospitals, clean water from a tap, weather forecasts, GPS, emergency services, none of it exists. You're completely dependent on the goodwill of people you can't even communicate with, in a world where one mistake could be fatal. The buildings are getting closer, and you can see that they're not buildings in any sense you'd recognize. They're low, rectangular structures made of what looks like mud brick, with flat roofs and tiny windows. Smoke is rising from several of them, and you can smell cooking food, burning wood, and less pleasant odors that suggest no indoor plumbing. And that's when you see the other people, and realize your problems are about to get much worse. As you approach the settlement, people start emerging from the building. Men, women, children, all stopping what they were doing to stare at the strange newcomer that Ketty, Nefret, and Seneb are bringing home. Their expressions range from curious to suspicious, to openly hostile. A few of the children point and whisper to their parent. An elderly man with a staff says something sharp to Ketty that sounds like a challenge or a question. Several of the younger men move to block your path, their hands resting on tools that could easily become weapons. You're not just meeting three kind strangers anymore. You're being presented to an entire community that has to decide whether you're a threat, a burden, or potentially useful. And right now, looking at their faces, you're getting the distinct impression that the jury is very much still out. Ketty raises his hands and starts speaking rapidly, gesturing between you and the group. You catch the word ma again, water, and something that might be sick based on how he mimes weakness and dehydration. He's explaining how he found you, trying to gain sympathy for your obvious distress.
but then one of the younger men says something that changes the entire tone of the conversation. Whatever he said, it made everyone go quiet. Not good quiet, tense quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before someone makes a very bad decision. Several people nod in agreement with whatever he suggested, and their expressions become decidedly less welcoming. Nefret responds quickly, her voice sharp with what sounds like disagreement. She gestures at you and says several words emphatically, shaking her head. The boy, Seneb, chimes in with what sounds like support for his mother's position. But the young man who spoke isn't backing down. He takes a step closer to you, and looks you up and down with undisguised suspicion. Then he says something directly to you, a question, or a challenge that everyone clearly expects you to answer. The problem is, you still have no idea what anyone is saying. All you can do is look helplessly from face to face, seeing the growing impatience in their expression. Your inability to respond is making you look either dangerously foreign, or dangerously stupid, and neither option seems likely to end well. That's when Ketty makes a decision that will determine your immediate future. He steps between you and the hostile young man, and says something in a tone that brooks no argument. It sounds like he's claiming some kind of authority or responsibility. The young man argues back, but Ketty cuts him off with a gesture, and a few sharp words. Then Ketty turns to you and very slowly and clearly, says something while pointing to a specific building. The meaning is clear even without language. You're coming with me. The crowd murmurs among themselves as Ketty guides you toward what appears to be his home. It's slightly larger than some of the others, with what looks like a small courtyard area. As you walk, you can feel dozens of eyes following your every move, and you catch fragments of conversation that sound like gossip, speculation, and not a small amount of concern. You're safe for now, but it's clear that your presence has disrupted the normal routine of this community. People are talking, debating, probably arguing about what to do with the strange foreign person who can't speak properly and appeared out of nowhere. And as Ketty leads you inside his home, you get your first real look at what your new life might be like. The interior of the house is dim, cool, and utterly alien to your modern sensibilities. The walls are thick mud brick, providing insulation from the brutal heat outside. The floor is packed earth, covered in some places with woven mats. There's no furniture as you'd recognize it, just low platforms that might serve as beds or seating, some large pottery vessels for storage, and a few tools hanging from wooden pegs. But it's clean. Surprisingly, reassuringly clean. Someone, probably Nefret, takes care of this space. The floor is swept, the pottery is organized, and everything has its place. This isn't the primitive squalor you might have expected from ancient living conditions. Nefret says something to Ketty and gestures toward you. He nods and points to one of the low platforms, then mimes lying down and resting. They want you to sleep here, to recover from whatever ordeal brought you to their doorstep. But before you can even think about rest, you realize you have urgent practical problems to solve. First, you need to use a bathroom, badly. The water you drank is going right through you, and the stress of the situation isn't helping. But where's the bath? You look around the single room, and see no doors, no partitions, no obvious facilities. How do you ask where's the toilet in ancient Egyptian when you don't speak ancient Egyptian? This is exactly the kind of practical survival problem they never covered in history class. You try pointing and making questioning sounds, but Ketty and Nefret just look confused. Finally, in desperation, you hold your stomach and make an uncomfortable face, hoping they'll understand the universal language of digestive distress. Nefret's expression immediately shifts to understanding, and she says something that sounds like gentle teasing to Ketty. She gestures for you to follow her, and leads you outside to a small structure behind the house that you hadn't noticed before. And that's when you get your first real culture shock about ancient Egyptian sanitation. The bathroom is a small mud brick enclosure with a hole in the ground. No plumbing, no toilet paper, no privacy door, just a hole and a pile of sand for covering things up after. The smell makes it very clear that this facility has been in use for a while. Your modern sensibilities are horrified, but your body doesn't care about modern sensibilities right now. You do what you have to do, trying not to think too hard about the hygiene implications, or what this means for your long-term health prospects. When you emerge from the latrine, Nefret is waiting with a small pottery vessel of water, and a piece of rough cloth. She shows you how to clean your hands, and you're grateful to realize that even in ancient times, people understood the basics of cleanliness after using the facilities. But as you're washing your hands with water that's probably full of bacteria and soap that hasn't been invented yet, the full reality of your situation crashes over you like a muddy wave. You're not just visiting ancient Egypt, you're going to have to live every single aspect of daily life that you've taken for granted, has to be relearned. How to eat without getting sick. How to stay clean without modern hygiene products. How to communicate without a common language. How to work without modern tools. How to survive without modern medicine. And that's assuming these people let you stay. Right now you're a guest in Ketty's home, but that's temporary charity. Eventually you'll need to prove that you can contribute something to this community, or you'll be asked to leave. And where would you go? You have no money, no skills they'd recognize, and no knowledge of the geography beyond this settlement. As you follow Nefret back into the house, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a polished bronze surface hanging on the wall. The person staring back at you looks exactly like what you are, a lost, confused, terrified time traveler, who has no idea how to survive in the world they've fallen into. But then Nefret does something that gives you the first glimmer of hope. She brings you a bowl of something that smells like food. Actual food, not just water. It looks like bread soaked in some kind of broth, with what might be vegetables floating in it. Nothing you recognize specifically, but it smells nourishing and safe. As she hands you the bowl, she says something that includes a word you think might mean eat. Then she sits down across from you, and watches expectant. This isn't just about feeding a hungry stranger. This is about hospitality, about welcoming someone into your home, and offering them the protection of your family. You take a tentative bite, and it tastes surprisingly good. The bread is dense and nutty, the broth is savory and filling, and the vegetables add texture and flavor. It's simple food, but it's been prepared with care and skill by someone who knows how to make the most of limited ingredients. But more importantly, it's being shared. Nefret has her own bowl, and she's eating the same food she's given you. This isn't charity rations, this is a family meal, and you've been invited to join. And that's when you realize what you need to do to survive in this world. You need to become part of this community, not as a strange visitor who needs to be tolerated, but as a contributing member who has something valuable to offer. The question is, what do you have that people in ancient Egypt would find useful? Your modern knowledge is simultaneously your greatest asset and your greatest liability. You know things that won't be discovered for thousands of years, but you can't reveal that knowledge too obviously, without seeming like a witch or a demon. You need to find ways to help people that seem natural and logical to their world. As you're finishing the meal, Ketty comes back into the house and sits down with his own bowl. He studies you while he eats, and you can practically see him trying to figure out what to do with you. Finally he points to himself and says Ketty again, then makes a gesture that looks like he's working with his hands, maybe pottery or construction. Then he points to you and raises his eyebrows questioningly. What can you do? What skills do you have that would be useful? This is your first job interview in ancient Egypt, and everything depends on your answer. You need to think fast about what abilities you have that would translate to ancient Egyptian society. You can't say you're a computer programmer or a marketing manager. Those concepts don't exist yet. But what underlying skills do those jobs require that might be useful here? Problem solving, planning, organization, teaching. Most modern jobs require some combination of thinking, communicating, and coordinating with other people. Maybe you can find a way to demonstrate those abilities without revealing their modern context. You point to yourself and try to mime teaching, making gestures like you're showing someone how to do something, nodding encouragingly, helping guide their hand. Both Ketty and Nefret watch intently, and you see something like recognition in their expressions. Then you try to show problem solving by pointing to different objects in the room, and making gestures like you're figuring out how they work, or how they could be improved. It's clumsy communication, but they seem to understand that you're presenting yourself as someone who can learn and help. But then Ketty asks you something that makes your blood run cold. He stands up and walks to a wall where several tools are hanging, things that look like hammers, chisels and other implements you don't recognize. He takes one down and offers it to you, saying something that sounds like an instruction. Oh no! He's testing whether you can actually do physical work, and you, with your soft modern hands and complete lack of experience with ancient tools, are about to reveal just how useless you really are. You take the tool. It's heavier than you expected, and clearly hand-forged from metal, that looks different from modern steel. You try to hold it the way you think it should be held, but even that feels wrong. Ketty watches your grip, and immediately sees that you have no idea what you're doing. He doesn't look angry, exactly, but he does look concerned. If you can't do physical work, and you can't communicate properly, what exactly are you going to contribute to a community where everyone has to pull their weight to survive?
That's when Nefret saves you with an unexpected intervention. She says something sharp to Ketty and takes the tool away from you. Then she brings out something else, a piece of cloth with a rip in it, and what looks like a bone needle with thread. She hands these to you and mimes sewing, watching to see how you handle the delicate work. This you can do. You're not an expert seamstress, but you've repaired clothes before, and the basic concept of pushing thread through fabric is the same whether it's ancient Egypt or modern times. Your stitches are clumsy and uneven, but they hold the fabric together. Nefret nods approvingly and says something to Ketty that sounds like explanation or argument. She's pointing out that you have skills, just not the ones he was testing for. Maybe not everyone needs to be a craftsman or a labourer. Maybe there's room in this community for different kinds of contributions. But you're about to discover that your biggest challenge isn't proving your usefulness. As evening approaches and the sun starts to set, the temperature begins to drop. What had been blazing, unbearable heat starts to moderate into something almost pleasant. But then you realize that if the day was this hot, the night might be freezing. Desert temperatures can swing dramatically between day and night, and you have no idea how cold it gets here after dark. More people start arriving at Ketty's house. Neighbors, friends, family members coming to get a look at the strange newcomer. Each new arrival means more curious stares, more rapid conversations you can't understand, and more speculation about who you are and where you came from. An elderly woman who seems to command considerable respect examines you like you're a puzzle she's trying to solve. A middle-aged man asks you direct questions that you can't answer, growing increasingly frustrated with your blank stares. Several children gather around to poke at your strange clothes and whisper observations to each other, and that's when the real interrogation begins. The elderly woman who everyone seems to defer to sits down directly in front of you and begins what's clearly a formal questioning session. She asks you something and waits for an answer. When you don't respond, she repeats the question more slowly and clearly. Still no response from you. She tries a different approach, pointing to specific things and saying words, then pointing to you expectantly. She's testing whether you understand Egyptian at all, or whether you're just pretending not to understand. The problem is, the longer you remain silent, the more suspicious everyone becomes. Your inability to answer basic questions is starting to look less like confusion and more like deception. People are murmuring to each other in tones that sound increasingly unfriendly. That's when you make a desperate decision that could either save you or doom you. You take a deep breath and try to speak some of the Egyptian words you think you've learned. Ketty, you say, pointing to your host. Nefret, pointing to his wife. Maya, pointing to water. Jemmy, pointing to yourself. The elderly woman's expression changes immediately. You do understand some Egyptian, not much, but enough to prove that you're at least trying to communicate. She nods approvingly and tries a new approach, speaking more slowly and using simpler words. Over the next hour, with painful slowness and lots of gestures, you manage to establish a few basic facts. You're not from any nearby settlement. You don't remember how you got here. You're grateful for their help, and you want to learn their ways. It's not much, but it's enough to shift the mood from suspicious to cautiously optimistic. You're not a threat or a fraud. You're just a very confused stranger who needs help. But then someone asks the question you've been dreading most. A young man who's been listening to the conversation suddenly points at you and says something that makes everyone go quiet. Whatever he asked, it's the question that gets to the heart of your mysterious appearance. The elderly woman repeats his question, and from their expressions you can tell this is important. They're asking something fundamental about your identity or your origins, something that a normal person would be able to answer easily. You look around at all the expectant faces and realize that this is the moment of truth. Whatever you say next will determine whether these people accept you into their community or decide you're too dangerous or strange to keep around. But what can you say? The truth is impossible to believe and might get you declared a demon. A lie might be easier to accept, but if they catch you in it, you'll lose their trust completely. So you choose a different approach, one that just might. Instead of trying to answer their question directly, you put your hand on your head and make an expression of pain and confusion. Then you point to yourself and shake your head, making it clear that you don't remember or can't explain. It's not exactly a lie. You really don't know how you got here, and the whole situation is genuinely confusing and painful. You're just letting them draw the conclusion that you've suffered some kind of injury or trauma that affects your memory. The elderly woman studies you carefully, then nods slowly. She says something to the others that sounds like an explanation or a decision. People start to relax, and the hostile tension begins to dissipate. Someone mentions what sounds like a word for head injury, and several people nod understanding. This makes sense to them, someone who was hurt and confused, who lost their memory and ended up wandering in the desert until Ketty found them. And just like that, you have an identity that this community can accept. You're no longer a mysterious stranger with unexplainable origins. You're a victim of misfortune who needs care and patience while you recover. It's a story that fits their worldview and explains your strange behavior without making you seem threatening. As the evening progresses and people start to return to their own homes, the atmosphere becomes almost normal. Children still stare at you curiously, but it's the curiosity of seeing someone interesting rather than something dangerous. Adults speak to you more gently, using the tone reserved for people who are sick or hurt. Nefret brings out blankets and shows you where you'll sleep, on one of the low platforms covered with woven cloth that smells of wool and human habitation. It's not comfortable by modern standards, but it's infinitely better than sleeping outside in the desert. But as you settle down for your first night in ancient Egypt, you realize the real survival challenge is just beginning. Tomorrow, you'll need to start proving that you can contribute to this community. The injured and confused story will only carry you for so long before people expect you to start pulling your weight. You'll need to learn their language, their customs, their work patterns and their social expectations. And you'll need to do it all without revealing that you're actually from a time so far in the future that these people couldn't even imagine it. One slip-up, one anachronistic reference, and your carefully constructed identity could come crashing down. As you lie on the rough blankets, staring up at a ceiling lit only by the flickering light of an oil lamp, you can hear the sounds of the ancient world settling down for the night. Somewhere nearby a baby is crying, a dog barks in the distance, people are having quiet conversations in their homes, the murmur of voices speaking a language you're only just beginning to understand. And that's when you hear something that makes your modern blood freeze, a sound like nothing you've ever heard before, a low rumbling roar that seems to come from the direction of the river. It's followed by what sounds like splashing, then another roar, deeper and more threatening than the first. You sit up quickly, your heart pounding. What kind of animals live in ancient Egyptian rivers? Your history classes covered pharaohs and pyramids, but they definitely didn't prepare you for whatever is making those terrifying sounds just a few hundred yards from where you're trying to sleep. Keti and Nefret don't seem alarmed by the noise. If anything, they sound slightly annoyed by it, like neighbors complaining about a barking dog. Nefret says something that includes a word you don't recognize, and Keti responds with what sounds like agreement. But you're lying there in the dark, realizing that this world is full of dangers you haven't even considered yet. Wild animals that see humans as prey, diseases that can kill you in days, natural disasters you can't predict or prepare for, political conflicts you don't understand but could get caught up in anyway. Morning comes way too early, announced by sounds you definitely didn't expect. You're awakened not by an alarm clock, but by the sound of roosters crowing, people talking loudly outside, and what sounds like large animals moving around. The sun isn't even fully up yet, but the entire community is already stirring. Keti is already awake and dressed, preparing to leave for whatever work occupies his days. He sees you sitting up and says something that sounds like a greeting, then points outside and makes gestures that suggest you should come with him. Your first day of real survival in ancient Egypt is about to begin, and you have no idea what to expect. Are you going to be put to work immediately? Will you be tested to see what skills you actually have? Will people be patient with your obvious incompetence? Or are you about to discover just how harsh ancient life can be for people who can't contribute? Nefret hands you another bowl of that bread and broth mixture, and you realize this might be your standard breakfast for the foreseeable future. No coffee, no cereal, no toast with jam. Just whatever the local ingredients and cooking methods can produce. But when you step outside, you get your first real look at ancient Egyptian daily life. The settlement is bustling with activity that looks like organized chaos. People are leading animals, goats, cattle, what might be sheep, toward the river. Others are carrying large pottery vessels, probably for water collection. Children are running around, some helping with chores, others just being children in the universal way that transcends time period. And everyone is working. Everyone has a job, a task, a responsibility that contributes to the community's survival. Even the children who are playing are also learning, watching the adults, copying their movements, gradually acquiring the skills they'll need as they grow up. You're the only person standing around looking confused and useless, and people are starting to notice. Keti says something to a group of men who are gathered around what looks like construction materials, mud bricks, wooden beams, tools you don't recognize. One of them looks at you and asks Keti a question that's clearly about whether you're going to help with whatever they're building, and that's when you realize you're about to get your first work assignment. Keti gestures for you to join the group, and suddenly you're surrounded by men who smell of sweat and mud, and honest labor. They're examining you like a piece of equipment, trying to figure out what you're good for and whether you'll be more help than hindrance. One of them hands you what looks like a hammer made of stone and wood. Another points to a pile of mud bricks and makes a gesture that suggests moving them from one place to another. A third man says something that sounds like instructions, though you can't understand a word of it. This is your first real test of whether you can function in ancient Egyptian society. Can you do physical labor? Can you follow instructions you don't understand? Can you work alongside people who have no reason to be patient with your incompetence? You pick up one of the mud bricks.
It's heavier than you expected, and rougher, and it immediately starts crumbling slightly in your soft modern hands. But you carry it to where the man pointed, trying to look like you know what you're doing. But then something goes wrong that reveals just how out of place you really are. As you're carrying your second brick, it slips from your hands and crashes to the ground, breaking into several pieces. The sound stops all conversation, and suddenly everyone is staring at the clumsy foreigner who can't even carry a brick without dropping it. One of the men says something that sounds like frustration or annoyance. Another shakes his head and mutters what's probably ancient Egyptian profanity. You've just demonstrated that you're not only unskilled, but potentially destructive to their work. Ketty quickly intervenes, saying something that sounds like an explanation or apology to the other men. Then he takes you aside and tries a different approach, showing you how to hold the bricks properly, how to balance them, how to carry them without dropping them. His patience is remarkable, considering you're probably slowing down his work considerably, but you can see the concern in his eye. If you can't contribute something useful soon, his generosity in taking you in could start to seem like a mistake to his neighbors. That's when you have an inspiration that might just save your reputation. While you're clearly hopeless at the physical aspects of construction, you notice something about their building process that your modern eye can see but they can't. They're having trouble keeping the walls straight and level. They're using techniques that work, but they're inefficient and inconsistent. You can't build better than they can, but you might be able to help them build more accurate. You've seen modern construction. You understand concepts like measuring and leveling that they're doing by eye and instinct. You pick up a long straight piece of wood and show them how it can be used as a measuring stick to make sure walls are the same height. You find a flat stone and demonstrate how it can be used to check whether surfaces are level. You use string to show how to make sure corners are square and walls are straight. And suddenly everything changes. The men stop what they're doing and watch intently as you demonstrate these simple but effective techniques. One of them tries using the measuring stick and immediately sees how much more accurate it makes his work. Another uses the string method and gets a perfectly straight line on his first try. Within minutes they're adapting your suggestions and improving on them. Someone finds a better piece of wood for measuring. Someone else figures out how to use the string method for marking foundation. They're taking your basic concepts and making them work better within their existing knowledge and materials. You're not just contributing, you're teaching. And teaching is something these people value highly. The man who was annoyed about the broken brick is now nodding approvingly at your demonstrations. Ketty looks relieved and proud that his decision to help you is being validated. But your success creates a new problem you didn't anticipate. Word spreads quickly through the settlement that the strange foreigner with the head injury actually knows some useful things. By midday, people are coming to see your building techniques, and some are asking for help with their own project. An older woman brings you a loom that isn't working properly and gestures for you to look at it. A young man shows you a tool that's broken and wants to know if you can fix it. Children start following you around, fascinated by your different way of doing things. You're becoming known as someone who sees problems differently, who has ideas that work even if they're strange. It's exactly what you needed for social acceptance. But it's also dangerous. The more attention you attract, the more questions people will ask about where you learned these techniques. And that's when someone asks the question you've been dreading. An elderly craftsman who's been watching your demonstrations pulls Ketty aside and has what's clearly an intense conversation. You can't understand the words, but you can read the body language. He's asking serious questions about your background and training. Where did you learn these methods? Who taught you? What other knowledge do you have? The questions that seemed safely avoided yesterday are becoming unavoidable as your usefulness becomes apparent. Ketty looks uncomfortable as he tries to answer. He keeps pointing to his head and making the confused gesture you used to explain your memory problem. But the craftsman isn't satisfied with vague explanations. He wants details about your training and experience. Finally, the craftsman approaches you directly and starts asking questions in simple Egyptian, speaking slowly and clearly. He points to your techniques, then to you, then makes questioning gestures. Where did this knowledge come from? So you make up a story that just might work. You point to yourself, then make a gesture like traveling, walking with your hands, looking around at different places. Then you point to different people and make teaching gestures, as if you learned these techniques from various masters during your travels. It's not entirely a lie, you did learn these things from different sources, even if those sources were modern education and experience rather than ancient craftsmen. And the idea of a traveling student who learned from multiple teachers is something they can understand and accept. The craftsman nods thoughtfully and asks more questions. What other places have you been? What other techniques have you learned? You respond with more vague gestures and the few Egyptian words you know, always emphasizing that your memory is still confused from your injury. But you can see him thinking, evaluating, trying to decide whether your knowledge is valuable enough to make your mysterious origins worth ignoring. That evening, you discover that your reputation is spreading faster than you expected. As you're eating dinner with Ketty's family, people keep stopping by the house. They're not just curious neighbors anymore. They're people with problems they want you to solve, questions they want to ask, techniques they want to learn. A farmer wants to know if you have ideas for improving his irrigation system. A potter is interested in your thoughts on kiln design. A weaver has heard that you might know different ways of working with thread and wants to see what you can show. You're becoming the settlement's unofficial consultant on technical problems, which is both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because it gives you a secure place in the community. Terrifying because each success raises expectations and creates pressure to demonstrate even more advanced knowledge. But then Nefret pulls you aside and gives you some advice that changes everything. She speaks slowly and clearly, using simple words and gestures to make sure you understand. From what you can gather, she's warning you about something. About being too eager to show off your knowledge. About attracting too much attention too quickly. She points to herself, then to the other women, then makes a gesture that suggests working together, being part of the group. Then she points to you and makes a different gesture, standing apart, being different, being isolated. You think she's telling you that while your knowledge is valuable, you need to be careful not to become so different from everyone else that you can't fit in. You need to contribute without overwhelming, to help without taking over, to be useful without being threatening. And that night you learn why her warning was so important. As you're settling down to sleep, you overhear a conversation between Ketty and Nefret that sounds serious and concerned. You catch a few words: your name, something that might mean knowledge or skill, and several phrases you don't understand but that sound worried. They're discussing you, and from their tone it's not entirely positive. Your rapid integration and growing reputation have created complications you didn't foresee. Maybe some people are jealous of the attention you're getting. Maybe others are suspicious of your unusual knowledge. Maybe there are political or social dynamics you don't understand that your success has disrupted. You realize that survival in ancient Egypt isn't just about learning skills and contributing to the community. It's about navigating complex social relationships, understanding cultural boundaries, and fitting in without standing out too much. The next morning brings a test you never expected. You're awakened not by the usual sounds of daily activity, but by voices outside that sound urgent and upset. People are talking rapidly, and there's an undercurrent of worry or fear in their conversations. Ketty emerges from the house looking grim, and when he sees you're awake, he says something that includes words you think might mean trouble and question. Someone is coming, someone important, and they want to talk to you. Through the doorway you can see a small group of people approaching, better dressed than most of the villagers, carrying themselves with the authority of officials or religious leaders. This isn't a casual social visit. This is an official inquiry. Your rapid rise from helpless stranger to valued community member has attracted attention from people with power to make decisions about your future, and from their expressions you're not sure those decisions are going to be favorable. And when the officials arrive, you realize your entire survival strategy is about to be put to the ultimate test. The lead figure is clearly someone important. His clothes are finer, his posture more commanding, and everyone else defers to him immediately. He looks at you with sharp, intelligent eyes that seem to see right through your carefully constructed story. He speaks to Ketty first, asking what sound like formal official questions. Ketty responds carefully, respectfully, providing the same explanations he's been giving everyone else. Found you in the desert. You were confused and injured. You've been helpful to the community. But then the official turns to you and asks something direct. His tone isn't hostile, but it's not friendly either. It's the tone of someone who's used to getting answers and doesn't appreciate evasion or confusion. You look to Ketty for guidance, but he just nods encouragingly. You're going to have to handle this yourself. Whatever this official wants to know, you're going to have to provide an answer that satisfies him, without revealing anything that could get you declared a threat or an imposter. So you give the performance of your life. You respond with the same story you've been developing, pointing to your head, looking confused, making gestures that suggest memory loss and disorientation. You say the few Egyptian words you know clearly and correctly, showing that you're learning the language but still struggling with it. Then, inspired by desperation, you demonstrate some of your building techniques. You show the official the measuring stick method, the string line technique for straight walls, the stone leveling process. You make it clear that while your memory might be damaged, your hands still remember how to solve problems. The official watches intently, asking questions about each technique. Where did you learn this? How does it work? Can you teach it to others? You respond with the traveling student story, always emphasizing that your memory is unclear but your skills are intact. And then he asks you something that makes your heart stop. The official points toward the river, then toward the horizon, then back to you. He's asking about your journey, specifically, which direction you came from, how long you traveled, what settlements you passed through. These are questions that a real traveler would be able to answer, even with memory problem. You would remember something about the major landmarks, the distances, the geography of your recent travels. Your inability to provide any of these details is going to look very suspicious, but then you have an inspiration born of pure desperation. You make gestures that suggest not just memory loss, but complete disorientation, spinning around, looking confused about directions, holding your head as if trying to remember something painful. You're not just claiming amnesia about your origin, you're claiming that your injury left you unable to understand direction, distance, or geography. It's a more severe condition, but it explains why you can't answer questions that any normal traveler could handle. The official studies you for what feels like an eternity. He walks around you slowly, examining you like a physician, evaluating a patient or a judge weighing evidence. He asks Ketty more questions, listens to responses from other villagers who have gathered to watch the proceeding. Then he does something unexpected. He picks up one of the tools from your building demonstration and hands it to you. He says something that sounds like an instruction or a command. You realize he's testing you in real time, wanting to see if your claimed skills are genuine or if you're just good at talking. This is your moment to prove that whatever else might be mysterious about you, your ability to contribute is real and valuable. You take the tool and quickly set up a demonstration of the leveling technique, showing how to use it to ensure that a surface is perfectly flat. Then you use the measuring stick to show how to make sure two structures are exactly the same height. And suddenly the entire atmosphere changes. The official's expression shifts from suspicion to interest, then to something that might be approval. He asks more questions, not about your origins now, but about your techniques. Can these methods be used for larger construction projects? How would they work for temple building? What other applications might they have? You realize you've just passed from being a potential threat to being a potential asset. Your mysterious origins are still concerning, but your practical value is undeniable. And in a world where useful skills are precious resources, value often trumps mystery. The official has a brief, intense conversation with Ketty and several other villagers. From their gestures and expressions, they seem to be discussing arrangements, where you'll live, what work you'll do, how your knowledge will be shared with the community. But then he tells you something that changes everything about your situation. The official addresses you directly, speaking slowly and clearly. From his gestures and the few words you recognize, you understand that he's not just approving your presence in the village, he's offering you official status, something about being registered, about having recognized position, about being assigned specific responsibilities. You're not just a charitable case anymore, you're being offered actual membership in the community, with the rights and obligations that come with it. But there's clearly a condition. He keeps pointing toward a larger settlement in the distance, making gestures that suggest travel, work and what might be construction projects. He wants you to share your knowledge, not just with this small village, but with larger, more important building efforts. You're being recruited. Your accidental demonstration of useful skills has attracted official attention, and now you're being invited to contribute to projects that matter to people with real authority. And you realize this opportunity comes with dangers you hadn't considered. Working on official projects means working under official scrutiny, more important people asking more detailed questions about your background and training, higher expectations for performance and knowledge, greater consequences if you make mistakes or reveal inconsistencies in your story. But it also means security, official recognition, steady work, protection from anyone who might want to cause trouble for the mysterious foreigner, a place in society that's defined by your contributions rather than your origin. The official is waiting for your response, and you can see that this isn't really an optional invitation. Someone with your demonstrated skills doesn't get to choose whether or not to contribute to important community projects. You can accept the opportunity graciously, or you can have it imposed on you less graciously. But either way, your quiet life as a village problem solver is about to end. So you make the choice that will determine your entire future in ancient Egypt. You nod your agreement, trying to look honored by the opportunity rather than terrified by the implications. The official smiles for the first time since arriving, not warmly but with satisfaction at having secured a useful resource for his project. He says something to Ketty that sounds like arrangements being made, when you'll travel, what you'll need for the journey, how long you'll be away. Then he turns back to you and says something that includes words you think might mean tomorrow, and prepare. You're leaving, tomorrow, for a destination you don't know, to work on projects you can't imagine, with people whose expectations you might not be able to meet.
Everything you've learned about surviving in this small, relatively safe village is about to be tested in a much larger and more complex environment. That night, As you prepare for the biggest challenge of your ancient Egyptian adventure, Nefret helps you pack the few possessions you've accumulated. Some clothes that fit better than what you arrived in, tools you've been learning to use, a water container of your own. She's trying to hide her concern, but you can see she's worried about sending you off into a world where you'll have less protection and more scrutiny. Ketty pulls you aside for what seems like a serious conversation. He speaks slowly and uses gestures to make sure you understand. Something about being careful, about not revealing too much, about remembering that you're still learning their ways. He's giving you the same warning Nefret offered before, that your knowledge is valuable, but it's also dangerous. The more important you become, the more questions people will ask and the higher the stakes become for maintaining your carefully constructed identity. But then Seneb, the boy who first discovered you, gives you something that brings tears to your eye. He approaches shyly and hands you a small carved piece of wood, a simple figure that looks like it might represent protection or good luck. It's clearly something he made himself, crude but crafted with care and affection. He says something that includes your name, Jemmy, and makes gestures that suggest safe travel and successful work. This child who barely knows you is giving you a gift to keep you safe on your journey. It's a moment of pure human connection that transcends time, language, and cultural barriers. The same impulse that makes children today give handmade gifts to people they care about made an ancient Egyptian boy carve a protection charm for the strange foreigner who's become part of his community. You carefully tuck the carved figure into your bundle, and Seneb beams with pride that his gift has been accepted and valued. And as dawn breaks on your departure day, you realize how much your life has changed. Just a week ago you woke up lost, confused and helpless in a world you didn't understand. Now you're leaving that world behind to take on responsibilities in an even more complex environment. But you're leaving as someone with recognized skills, official status, and people who care about your welfare. You've learned to communicate in basic Egyptian, to recognize social cues and cultural expectations, to contribute something valuable to a community's survival. You've gone from being a burden who needed constant help to being a resource that officials want to claim for important projects. The terrified time traveler who couldn't even ask for water without help has become someone that ancient Egyptians consider worth investing in. But as the officials' party prepares to depart, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the water container and see someone who still looks like they're playing a role they don't fully understand. You've learned to survive in ancient Egypt, but you haven't learned to truly belong here. That's a lesson that's still ahead of you. The journey to your new assignment becomes an education in itself. As you travel with the officials group, you get your first real look at ancient Egypt, beyond the small village where you've been living. The landscape is more varied than you expected. Not just endless desert, but areas of green cultivation along the river, marshlands teeming with birds and wildlife, rocky hills that provide stone for construction. And everywhere you look, there are people, farmers working their fields, fishermen on the river, traders moving goods along well-worn paths, children playing in village courtyards. Ancient Egypt isn't the empty monument-filled landscape of modern tourist sites. It's a living, breathing civilization with millions of people going about their daily lives. But you also see things that remind you how different this world is from anything in your modern experience. Massive construction projects using only human and animal labor, with workers moving enormous stones using techniques you can observe but don't fully understand. Religious ceremonies that involve the entire community in ways that modern secular society has no equivalent for. And then you see your destination, and realize the true scale of what you've gotten yourself into. Rising from the landscape ahead is a construction project unlike anything you've ever imagined. Not a pyramid, those haven't been built yet, but something almost as impressive. A massive temple complex with walls that stretch for hundreds of yards, surrounded by scaffolding, ramps, and more workers than you've ever seen in one place. This isn't village-level construction where your simple techniques might make a noticeable difference. This is a major engineering project that requires sophisticated planning, advanced skills and coordination of thousands of workers. Your little measuring stick and stringline methods are going to seem pretty insignificant in this context. The official notices your expression and says something that might be encouragement or warning. You're not expected to revolutionize their construction methods. You're expected to contribute your small improvements to a much larger effort, managed by people who've been doing this kind of work for generations. But when you meet the chief architect, you discover your role is more important than you thought. The man in charge of the temple construction is clearly someone of enormous skill and experience. He examines the techniques you demonstrate with the eye of a professional evaluating innovation. He asks detailed questions about applications, modifications and scalability, that reveal a deep understanding of construction principles, and he's interested, not just politely interested, but genuinely excited about the possibilities your methods offer. He immediately sees how your leveling technique could improve foundation work, how your measuring methods could ensure consistency across large structures, how your stringline approach could help coordinate work between different teams. Within hours, you're not just demonstrating your techniques, you're helping to adapt them for large-scale application. The chief architect assigns experienced workers to learn your methods and test them on actual construction. You're becoming part of the engineering team for one of ancient Egypt's major building projects. But success brings a new kind of pressure you never anticipated. Word of your innovation spreads quickly through the construction site. Workers start coming to you with problems they want solved, techniques they want improved, ideas they want to test. You're becoming known as the person who thinks differently, who sees solutions that others miss. The problem is, each success raises expectations for the next one. If you can improve foundation leveling, surely you can also improve stone cutting. If you can help with wall construction, what about roof design? People start assuming that your unusual perspective makes you an expert on everything, not just on the few techniques you actually understand. You find yourself being asked questions you can't answer, being expected to solve problems you don't understand, being treated as an authority on subjects you know nothing about. Your success is creating a reputation you can't live up to. And then you make a mistake that threatens to expose your entire deception. During a discussion about roof construction, you absent-mindedly mention something about load-bearing capacity, using terminology that won't be developed for centuries. The moment the words leave your mouth, you realize you've made a potentially catastrophic error. The chief architect stops talking and stares at you. He asks you to repeat what you just said, and when you try to deflect or change the subject, he becomes insistent. Where did you learn that phrase? What does it mean exactly? Who taught you to think about construction in those terms? You can see him thinking, evaluating, starting to piece together the inconsistencies in your story. Your knowledge doesn't match your supposed background. Your terminology doesn't fit your claimed training. Your understanding seems to come from a completely different tradition than anything he's familiar with. So you make a desperate gamble to save your cover story. You grab your head and stagger slightly as if experiencing sudden pain or confusion. Then you look around with the expression of someone who's not sure where they are, or what they were just saying. Head injury, you manage to say in halting Egyptian, pointing to yourself. Sometimes, words come. Don't know where from. It's a risky strategy, claiming that your brain injury sometimes produces knowledge you don't consciously possess, but it's the only explanation that might account for your anachronistic insights without making you seem like a deliberate deceiver. The chief architect watches you carefully, trying to decide whether you're having a genuine medical episode or attempting to avoid his questions. Finally, he nods slowly and says something that sounds like sympathy mixed with caution, but you can see he's not entirely convinced. He's going to be watching you more carefully from now on, listening for more inconsistencies, evaluating whether your mysterious knowledge is worth the questions it raises. That night, you overhear a conversation that confirms your worst fear. As you're settling down to sleep in the workers' quarters, you catch fragments of discussion between the chief architect and his assistants. You can't understand everything they're saying, but you recognize your name and several words that sound like suspicious, questions, and investigation. They're talking about you and they're not entirely satisfied with your explanations. Your slip-up about load-bearing capacity has made them start examining all your knowledge more critically, looking for other inconsistencies or impossibilities. You realize that your survival strategy of gradually demonstrating useful skills while claiming memory problems is reaching its limits. The more advanced your contributions become, the harder it is to maintain the illusion that you're just a damaged craftsman with confused memory. But the next morning brings an unexpected opportunity to prove your value beyond question. You're awakened by sounds of crisis, people running, shouting, urgent conversations that carry the unmistakable tone of emergency. Something has gone seriously wrong with the construction project. When you emerge from the sleeping quarters, you see the problem immediately. A section of wall that was completed yesterday has partially collapsed during the night. Stone blocks are scattered across the construction site. Workers are standing around looking stunned, and the chief architect is examining the damage with an expression of grim concern. This isn't just a setback, it's a potential disaster. If the construction techniques are flawed, the entire temple could be at risk. If the foundation isn't stable, months of work might have to be torn down and rebuilt. If the cause isn't identified and corrected, the same problem could occur again. And you realize you might be the only person who can diagnose what went wrong. While the Egyptian architects are examining the collapsed stones and trying to understand the failure,
Your modern knowledge gives you a different perspective. You can see problems with drainage that would cause foundation instability. You recognize signs of settling that suggest the ground wasn't properly prepared. You understand concepts about thermal expansion and soil composition that affect structural integrity. But revealing this level of technical knowledge would be impossible to explain away as confused memories or head injury flashes. This is sophisticated engineering analysis that would require years of advanced training to understand. You're faced with a choice. Let the architects struggle to solve the problem using their existing knowledge, which might take weeks and result in more failures, or reveal insights that could expose your impossible origins, but might save the entire project. So you choose a middle path that just might work. Instead of explaining the technical problems directly, you start asking questions that guide the architects toward the correct diagnosis. Why was this particular section chosen for the wall? What's the soil composition here compared to other areas? How does water drain from this location during the flood season? You're using the Socratic method, leading people to discover the right answers rather than providing them directly. It's a way to share your knowledge without claiming expertise you shouldn't possess. The chief architect begins to see the patterns you're pointing toward. The collapsed section was built on ground that's less stable than it appeared, in a location where water accumulation weakens the foundation over time. The failure wasn't due to poor construction technique, it was due to inadequate site preparation. And when the problem is solved, your reputation reaches a new level. Within days, the architects have implemented new site preparation procedures. Based on the insights your questions helped them reach. They've also identified several other areas where similar problems might occur and taken preventive measures. The collapse that could have been a catastrophic failure has been turned into a learning opportunity that makes the entire project stronger. And you're credited not as the person who solved the problem, but as the person who asked the right questions to help others find the solution. It's the perfect way to contribute advanced knowledge while maintaining your cover story. You're not claiming to be an expert, you're just someone who notices things others miss and asks helpful questions. But your growing reputation attracts attention you never wanted. Word of the temple project's problem-solving success reaches beyond the construction site. Officials from other projects start visiting, wanting to meet the unusual craftsman who helped prevent a potential disaster. Then one day, a group arrives that makes everyone else defer immediately. These aren't local officials or construction supervisors. These are people from the royal court, representatives of Pharaoh himself, come to evaluate whether your insights might be valuable for royal construction project. You're about to be examined by people with the authority to completely change your life, for better or for worse. People who have the power to elevate you to positions of great importance, or to declare you too dangerous to remain free. And when the royal representatives interview you, you realize the stakes have never been higher. The lead representative is clearly someone of enormous authority and intelligence. He asks questions that probe not just your technical knowledge, but your understanding of politics, your loyalty to the kingdom, your potential usefulness for projects that might be too sensitive to discuss with ordinary workers. He's evaluating whether you're someone who can be trusted with important responsibilities, or whether your mysterious background makes you too risky for sensitive assignments. Every answer you give is being weighed for consistency, loyalty, and potential value to the royal administration. And then he asks the question that could determine your entire future in ancient Egypt. Would you be willing to work directly for Pharaoh on construction projects that are too important to entrust to anyone whose background isn't completely verified? Your answer will determine whether you become one of the most important people in ancient Egypt. You realize that this is the ultimate test of your survival strategy. Accept the offer, and you'll have security, status, and resources beyond anything you've imagined. But you'll also be under constant scrutiny by people who have every reason to investigate your background thoroughly. Refuse and you might seem suspicious or ungrateful, which could lead to very unpleasant consequences. But there's a third option that just might work. You take a deep breath and respond with the humility that's kept you alive so far. I am honored beyond words by such consideration, but I fear my injuries have left me unreliable for responsibilities so important to the kingdom. Perhaps my small skills could serve better in supporting role. The representative studies you carefully. Your response shows appropriate respect and loyalty, but also suggests limitations that might explain why you shouldn't be given high visibility positions. It's a way of declining the opportunity without seeming to reject royal favor. But his response surprises you completely. Instead of being disappointed by your humility, the representative smiles. The first genuine warmth you've seen from him. He says something that sounds approving, then explains in simple Egyptian that your caution is itself a valuable quality. Too many people, he suggests, are eager to claim abilities they don't possess, or take on responsibilities they can't handle. Someone who understands their own limitations is actually more trustworthy than someone who promises everything. He's not withdrawing the offer, he's modifying it. Instead of being assigned to the most sensitive royal projects, you'll be given opportunities to contribute your insights to important work, while remaining in supportive, rather than leadership roles. It's exactly the kind of arrangement that could give you security, without excessive scrutiny. And that's how you find yourself with the strangest job in ancient Egypt. Over the following months, you become something like a consulting problem solver for various construction projects throughout the region. You travel from site to site, examining challenges that have stumped local architects, asking the questions that help them find solutions. You're not the person in charge of anything, you're the person who notices things others miss, who suggests approaches that haven't been tried, who helps experienced professionals see their work from different perspectives. It's the perfect role for someone with advanced knowledge who needs to share it carefully. And the work is fascinating. You help design better drainage systems for temple foundations, develop improved techniques for moving massive stone blocks, figure out solutions for construction in flood-prone areas. Each project teaches you more about ancient Egyptian engineering, while giving you opportunities to subtly introduce concepts from your modern knowledge. But then you encounter a problem that makes you question everything you thought you knew. You're called to examine a construction site where workers have uncovered something unexpected. Carved stones that clearly predate the current project by centuries, maybe millennia. The hieroglyphs are in a style no one recognizes, and the construction techniques are different from anything in current Egyptian practice. But when you look at the stones, you recognize something that makes your blood run cold. The construction methods, the tool marks, the engineering approaches. They're similar to techniques you've been teaching, approaches you thought came from your modern knowledge. How is it possible that ancient Egyptians from centuries before your arrival were using methods that you believed came from the future? Are your innovations actually rediscoveries of lost knowledge? Or is something far stranger happening than simple time travel? And the mystery deepens when you examine the hieroglyphs more closely. While the other workers are focusing on the construction aspects of the discovery, you're studying the carved symbols with growing amazement and terror. Because some of these hieroglyphs look familiar, not from any ancient Egyptian texts you remember from school, but from sketches you've been making in your private note. You've been developing a personal system for recording your thoughts and observations, using symbols that combine Egyptian hieroglyphs with your own invented additions. But here, carved in stone centuries before your arrival, are symbols that match your supposedly original invention. Either you're going insane from the stress of living in ancient Egypt, or something about your presence here is creating effects that extend backward through time. The implications are terrifying. If your actions can influence the past, what other changes might you be causing without realizing it? That night, you have a dream that might not be a dream. You find yourself standing in a vast library, filled with scrolls and books you don't recognize, speaking with a figure whose face you can't quite see but whose voice sounds impossibly familiar. The figure explains that time isn't what you think it is, that past, present and future are all happening simultaneously, and that consciousness can influence events across all temporal periods. Your knowledge doesn't come from the future, the voice explains. It comes from the eternal present where all possibilities exist simultaneously. What you call memory is actually access to information that exists outside of linear time. When you wake up, you can't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a dream. The details are too clear, too consistent, too relevant to the mysteries you've been encountering. And you have new knowledge that you definitely didn't possess before sleeping, understanding of techniques and principles that seem to come from somewhere beyond your modern education. The next morning brings confirmation that something extraordinary is happening. When you return to the construction site with the mysterious ancient stones, you find that overnight more structures have been uncovered, not gradually revealed by careful excavation, but simply exposed as if the earth itself moved to reveal them. And these new discoveries include something that stops your heart. A carved stone that clearly depicts the temple project you've been working on, showing construction techniques you helped develop, including details that haven't been implemented yet but are planned for future phases of the work. The stone shows your techniques being used in a building project that was supposedly planned and carved hundreds of years before you were born. It's as if your presence in ancient Egypt has created a temporal loop where your future actions influenced past planning, which influenced the present construction, which enables your future contributions. And that's when the chief architect tells you something that changes everything. He pulls you aside and speaks quietly, making sure no other workers can overhear. What he tells you is both impossible and undeniable. These aren't the first mysterious stones they've found. Over the years of his career, ancient structures have been discovered at construction sites throughout Egypt, all showing knowledge and techniques that seem to come from outside their normal tradition. And every single discovery has occurred at projects where unusual consultants were working. People like you, with mysterious backgrounds and anachronistic knowledge, who appeared seemingly from nowhere and contributed insights that advanced Egyptian engineering significantly. You're not the first, he says quietly, and you won't be the last. There have always been people like you, appearing when we need new knowledge, disappearing when their work is done. The question isn't where you come from, it's what you're here to accomplish. You realize you're part of something far larger than you imagined. Ancient Egypt hasn't developed its remarkable engineering and architectural capabilities through purely linear progress. Instead, throughout history, mysterious individuals with advanced knowledge have appeared at crucial moments, contributing insights that accelerated development and enabled achievements that would otherwise have been impossible. The pyramids, the temples, the irrigation systems, the astronomical knowledge, all of it has been influenced by people like you, time travelers, or whatever you are, who appear when needed and help push civilization forward in ways it couldn't achieve alone. You're not an accident or an anomaly. You're part of a system, a process, a mechanism by which knowledge flows across time to ensure that human civilization develops the capabilities it needs when it needs them.
But this revelation brings a terrifying new question. If you're part of a deliberate system rather than a random accident, who or what is running that system? What intelligence decides when and where time travelers appear? What purposes are being served by these interventions in historical development? And most importantly, when your purpose is fulfilled, what happens to you? Do you get to return to your own time, or do you simply disappear like the other mysterious consultants who came before you? The chief architect can't answer these questions. He only knows the pattern, not the mechanism behind it. But he does offer one piece of advice that chills you to the bone. Don't try to fight what you are or change what you're here to do. Those who resist their purpose, they don't end well. That night, you make a decision that will determine your fate. Instead of continuing to pretend you're a normal person with memory problems, you decide to embrace whatever you actually are. If you're part of some cosmic system for advancing human knowledge, then you'll fulfill that role as completely and effectively as possible. You begin working more openly, contributing insights that you previously would have hidden, solving problems that require knowledge far beyond what any ancient Egyptian should possess. You stop worrying about maintaining your cover story and start focusing on making the maximum positive impact while you're here. The results are remarkable. Construction techniques advance by centuries in months. Engineering problems that have plagued Egyptian builders for generations are solved overnight. Projects that should take decades are completed in years. And as your true capabilities become apparent, something extraordinary happens. Instead of being declared a demon or a threat, you're increasingly treated as something approaching divinity. Not a god exactly, but something like a divine messenger. A gift from the gods to help Egypt achieve greatness. Pharaoh himself summons you to court, not to interrogate you about your origins, but to honor you as a blessing to the kingdom. The royal architects compete for the opportunity to work with you. Priests declare that your arrival was prophesied in ancient text. You've gone from desperate survivor to one of the most revered figures in ancient Egypt. Your mysterious origins, instead of being a liability, have become evidence of your divine purpose. But with great reverence comes great responsibility. You're no longer working on individual construction projects. You're helping to plan the architectural future of the entire civilization. Your insights are shaping decisions about city layouts, irrigation systems, defensive fortifications, and ceremonial structures that will influence Egyptian society for thousands of years. Every suggestion you make, every technique you introduce, every problem you solve, has implications far beyond the immediate project. You're not just helping ancient Egyptians build better buildings, you're helping to create the foundation for one of history's greatest civilizations. The weight of that responsibility is overwhelming. What if you make a mistake? What if one of your innovations has negative consequences you can't foresee? What if your interference prevents some crucial development that was supposed to happen naturally? And then you discover that your time in ancient Egypt is almost over. The signs are subtle at first. Dreams that feel like memories of your modern life. Moments of disorientation where you temporarily forget where and when you are. A growing sense that you're being pulled towards something you can't identify. The chief architect notices the change and confirms your suspicions. This is how it always happens. The mysterious consultants begin to fade from this time period as their work nears completion. Their consciousness starts to disconnect from ancient Egypt and reconnect with wherever they came from. You have perhaps weeks, maybe months, he tells you. Use the time well. Finish what you came here to accomplish. But what did you come here to accomplish? You still don't understand the purpose behind your presence here, the criteria for success, or what determines when your mission is complete. So you make a desperate attempt to leave a lasting legacy. Working frantically against time, you begin documenting everything, not just the techniques you've introduced, but the principles behind them, the reasoning that makes them work, the ways they can be adapted and improved in the future. You train apprentices who can continue developing your innovations after you're gone. You create detailed drawings and instructions that future architects can follow. You establish schools and workshops where your approaches will be preserved and refined. Most importantly, you try to teach people not just what to build, but how to think about building, how to analyze problems, test solutions, and develop new approaches when they encounter challenges you haven't anticipated. But your most important legacy isn't technical, it's philosophical. Through all your work and teaching, you've been demonstrating something more valuable than any construction technique: the idea that knowledge should be shared freely, that innovation comes from combining different perspectives, that progress happens when people are willing to question established methods and try new approaches. You've shown ancient Egyptians that they don't have to be limited by traditional ways of doing things, that they can develop new solutions to old problems, that they can achieve things their ancestors never imagined possible. This mindset, more than any specific technique, is what will enable Egyptian civilization to continue advancing long after you're gone. And then one morning, you wake up knowing that today is your last day in ancient Egypt. The knowledge comes with absolute certainty, like an appointment you've suddenly remembered. You don't know how you know, but you're completely sure that your time here is ending. You spend the day making final visits to projects you've worked on, saying goodbye to people who've become friends, completing the last details of documentation you want to leave behind. Everyone you encounter seems to understand what's happening, not the mechanics of it, but the reality that your time with them is ending. The farewells are emotional but also celebratory. You're not dying, you're completing a mission and returning to wherever you came from. It's sad to lose you, but it's also an honor to have been part of your purpose. That evening, as the sun sets on your final day, you understand everything. As you sit by the Nile, watching the same sunset that ancient Egyptians have watched for thousands of years, the full truth of your experience becomes clear. You weren't accidentally transported to ancient Egypt. You were sent here by some mechanism beyond your understanding, to contribute specific knowledge at a crucial time in human development. Your modern education, your problem-solving ability, your different perspective, all of it was precisely what ancient Egyptian civilization needed to advance from impressive but limited building techniques to the engineering capabilities that would enable them to create monuments that would last for millennia. You didn't learn to survive in ancient Egypt. You remembered how to fulfill your purpose there. The confusion and memory problems weren't symptoms of displacement. They were the process by which your modern consciousness adapted to function effectively in an ancient context. And as the first stars appear in the ancient sky, you begin to fade from this timeline. It's not dramatic or painful. It's more like gradually waking up from a vivid dream. The sounds and sights and smells of ancient Egypt become less distinct, less immediate, while other sensations begin to emerge. You can still see Keti and Nefret, and all the other people who became your friends and colleagues, but they're becoming more like memories than immediate experience. You can still feel the warm Egyptian air and the texture of mud, brick and linen, but other sensations are replacing them, and you realize that you're not losing these experiences, you're integrating them. Everything you learned, everyone you helped, every problem you solved has become part of who you are, permanently woven into your consciousness. You open your eyes in your own time, but you're not the same person who closed. You're lying in your own bed, in your own house, in your own century. Everything around you is exactly as you left it. Your modern furniture, your electronic devices, your familiar possessions, but you are fundamentally changed by your experience. You have memories of living in ancient Egypt that are as clear and detailed as any memories from your modern life. You have skills in construction and problem solving that blend ancient techniques with modern knowledge in ways that didn't exist before your journey. You have relationships with people who lived and died thousands of years ago, but who feel as real and important as anyone you know in your own time. Most importantly, you have a profound understanding of how human civilization develops, not through isolated individual achievement, but through a complex network of connections across time,
with knowledge flowing forward and backward to ensure that people get the insights they need when they need them. And you realize your work isn't finished. The techniques you developed in ancient Egypt, the problems you solved, the people you trained, all of that has rippled forward through time and influenced the world you've returned to. But now you have knowledge and perspectives that your own time needs. You understand things about construction, about problem solving, about community building, about the flow of knowledge across time that could benefit modern civilization just as your modern knowledge benefited ancient Egypt. You're not just someone who survived an impossible journey to the past. You're someone who's been given a mission to help improve human civilization in every time period you encounter. That night, as you process everything that happened, you make an incredible discovery. Researching online about ancient Egyptian architecture, you find references to techniques that perfectly match the innovations you introduced thousands of years ago. Archaeological discoveries describe construction methods that you remember developing with ancient Egyptian architects. Academic papers analyze engineering approaches that you helped create. Your contributions to ancient Egypt have become part of the historical record, studied by modern scholars who have no idea that the mysterious knowledge that advanced Egyptian construction capabilities came from someone who learned about Egyptian history in modern school. You've created a stable time loop where your modern education enabled you to improve ancient techniques, which influenced the development of knowledge that became part of your modern education. But the most amazing discovery is still to come. As you continue researching, you find something that takes your breath away. Historical references to other mysterious figures throughout history, who appeared at crucial moments with advanced knowledge that accelerated human development. A construction consultant in ancient Rome who introduced engineering concepts centuries ahead of his time. An agricultural advisor in medieval Europe who helped prevent famines through innovative farming techniques. An inventor in Renaissance Italy who contributed to artistic and scientific breakthroughs that shaped the modern world. Different names, different time periods, but the same pattern: mysterious individuals with anachronistic knowledge, who appeared when and where they were needed most to advance human civilization. And you realize you're part of an eternal network of time travelers. There's something or someone coordinating the flow of knowledge across time, ensuring that human civilization gets the insights it needs to overcome challenges and achieve breakthrough. You're not unique, you're part of a system that includes people from many different time periods, all contributing their knowledge to help humanity develop. Some of the great leaps forward in human history weren't purely the result of individual genius or cultural evolution. They were assisted by time travelers who brought knowledge from other eras to help solve critical problems. And now you understand your ongoing mission: to be ready to serve as a knowledge carrier whenever and wherever you're needed, whether that's in the past, the future, or other periods in your own timeline. 6 months later, you get confirmation that your adventure isn't over. You're working at your regular job, living your normal life, but you're different now in ways that your friends and colleagues can't quite identify. You solve problems more creatively. You see patterns others miss. You approach challenges with a combination of ancient wisdom and modern knowledge that makes you unusually effective. And then one morning you wake up with that familiar feeling of disorientation, that sense that something fundamental has changed during the night. But this time you're not in ancient Egypt. You're in what appears to be medieval Europe, judging by the stone buildings, the clothing of people walking by your window, and the complete absence of anything that looks remotely modern. Different time period, different challenges, but the same mission: figure out how to contribute your knowledge to help advance human civilization. And this time you're ready for the challenge. Instead of panicking about your displacement in time, you begin immediately assessing your situation and planning your survival strategy. You know how to adapt to unfamiliar cultures, how to learn new languages quickly, how to demonstrate valuable skills without revealing impossible knowledge. Most importantly, you know that you're here for a reason. Somewhere in this medieval world there are problems that your unique combination of modern, ancient, and experiential knowledge can help solve. Your job is to find those problems and apply your insights as effectively as possible. But as you prepare to begin this new adventure, you realize that each time travel experience builds on the previous ones. You now have knowledge not just from modern times, but from ancient Egypt as well. You're becoming a person who carries insights from multiple time periods, someone who can bridge different eras of human development, and you understand that this is just the beginning of an infinite adventure. As you step out into the medieval world to begin your next mission, you realize that there's no limit to how many time periods you might visit, how many civilizations you might help, how many different challenges you might face. Each experience makes you more capable of handling the next one. Each success gives you more knowledge to contribute to future assignments. Each time period you help advances human civilization in ways that benefit every other era. You've gone from being a confused accident victim to being a conscious participant in the greatest adventure possible, helping to guide human development across all of history. And every night, as you fall asleep in whatever time period you find yourself in, you smile knowing the truth. You're not just surviving in impossible situations, you're living the ultimate human experience. You're seeing how civilizations rise and fall, how knowledge develops and spreads, how individual contributions create ripples that influence the entire course of human history. Sometimes you wake up in ancient Egypt, sometimes in medieval Europe, sometimes in your own modern era, sometimes in time periods you couldn't have imagined. But wherever and whenever you are, you know your purpose: to help, to teach, to contribute, to bridge the gaps between what humanity knows and what it needs to learn. You've discovered that life isn't about finding a comfortable place and staying there. Life is about being ready for whatever challenge comes next, about growing capable enough to help wherever you're needed, about becoming someone who makes every time and place a little bit better. Sweet dreams, eternal time traveler. Tomorrow, the infinite adventure continues. And who knows, tonight you might dream of building pyramids with ancient Egyptian architects, or solving medieval engineering problems, or working on challenges in time periods that haven't been invented yet. Because you've learned the ultimate truth: home isn't a place or home is being someone who can make anywhere and anytime better, through knowledge, kindness, and the willingness to help others solve the problems that matter most. The story never ends, it just continues in new times and places. Welcome to eternity. Our story ends here. Thank you for listening. Hey, are you still awake? If you didn't fall asleep and enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. See you tomorrow in a new story.